Good morning, Europe, and good afternoon, Singapore. So even though we look the same, we didn't synchronize our dress code today, so purely by incident. But we are two bold guys in glasses, shaved, and in white shirts. Anyway, super privileged to be part of this panel. I will start by sort of sharing my speed introduction to Singapore. Back in '94, I applied for a job as a vacuum cleaner sales guy, meaning walking around in the HDBs in Singapore selling vacuum cleaners. So I arrived in September. First time I've been outside of Europe. And I was picked up by the airport and sent to central Singapore to a landlord who was kind enough to rent a room for me. I had to pay a deposit of 2,000 Singapore dollar, and that was exactly what I had in my wallet. So the day after, I had to start my work. So I couldn't afford to take a bus or a taxi, so I walked up to a petrol station and I borrowed a map book. And then for those of you who are familiar with Singapore, our office was up in Hougang. So I walked there, took me 3.5 hours. So that was my speed introduction to Singapore. Very sweaty, but it turned out to be my home. So when people talk to me about sort of cultural learnings and how things are different, I feel more Singaporean, Asian than I feel I'm Swedish. So when I travel back to Sweden, I feel like a stranger. So I tried it a few years, but so this is my home. That's my story. Over to you, Lars.
Hey guys, awesome to be here also. I wanted to tell the story about how I finally got to Asia. So I'd always wanted to work in Asia, but by coincidence, I ended up working in Norway instead after university. So I spent about 10 years in Norway working for different types of agencies, always saying, next year I'm going to go to Asia, next year I'm going to go to Asia. And I finally settled on moving to China. So when I finally got to the place where, I wanted to make the move, I started calling headhunters, and they all said, why would we want to hire a Norwegian agency guy who doesn't know anything about Asia to work in Asia? So, I was shut down quite substantially. Until I met one person who said, yeah, we might have a job for you in Hong Kong. Can you learn how to speak Cantonese and Mandarin in 3 months? If you can do that, then the job is yours. And clearly some kind of little bit of a trick question, I thought. So I said, I don't think that's reasonable to learn how to speak Mandarin and Cantonese in 3 months. They said, okay, fine, the job is not yours. So then I simply had to do something else. So I sold my flat. I bought some tickets to China, and spent a little bit of time to learn a little bit of Mandarin. So I got around in taxis, and I used those taxis to gate crash various advertising events and kind of corner people who had ability to hire until I found somebody who was willing to hire me, and that was in Ogilvy at that time. And that's how I got to Asia. So yeah, 10 years ago now, no more, 11, yeah. So anyway, still smile when I think about it. We wanted to just talk a little bit about how we've come to be and what we're doing. Poucke has already given us great context. We're going to skip a little bit of the context stuff and maybe talk a little more about our personal experience in this area. So let me share the screen. So Pierre is whispering to me that I should share the screen. Thanks. All right. Can you all see my screen? Yeah? Good. Okay. So we founded the Scale Factory end of last year. We had both been in a situation where, individually people had come to us and asked us, can you please help us we need some connections in here, or we need to figure out how to launch this product, or, do you know any investors who can do this and that? And Pierre and I sat together and we thought, well, instead of helping everyone for free, why don't we start a company around this? So that's how the Scale Factory was started. Our business idea is to help commercialize fairly early tech companies in Asia, and eventually later also do the return path to Europe, with Singapore as a launch pad. We focus on companies that have product market fit in their existing markets, so the products work. So we're not on the tech side where we develop the tech, but we are then very focused on how things can come very quickly to some kind of commercial benefit, and get the toehold in the market, which is so important with the first contracts. Since we started, we've signed, what is it now? 12 companies. And actually, most of our traction started happening after lockdown, so in April onwards, which is kind of interesting. And we now have 9 people working for our company, mostly virtually, obviously. So, great fun and great traction. I'm going to talk about a few of our companies later to kind of give some examples. But just briefly on what we do, when we start working with one of the brands who we're helping, we start out by some pretty deep planning. We have to figure out, is the go-to market model right? Is the product market fit right? What are the segments that should be targeted? All that kind of stuff happens in the first phase. And then we build what we call an acquisition engine consisting of marketing and sales capabilities to really start driving commercial benefits in the market. This is then supported by a suite of tech to help us get into the right places and make sure that everything is connected from marketing into CRM, but also facilitated by what we call network orchestration, which is a fancy word for doing what is so important in Asia, getting the right people involved to actually open doors. And that's kind of, in brief, our secret sauce, if you will. Shin talked a lot about this stuff, right? But what we're really seeing and what we think is interesting for companies in Europe and elsewhere is Southeast Asia is an amazing market. It was an amazing market before COVID. We still think it is an amazing market after COVID. 20% of global revenues from the biggest companies in the world. Very fast growth rate, increasing to 300 billion in 2025 in the internet economy. I think Shin said 305 billion, so a little disagreement there, but still in the same direction. And obviously this mobile first population that is coming up and only knows mobile as the entry point into the digital economy is super exciting and very interesting for all sorts of businesses. And as we talked about, and which is quite interesting for this part of the world as well, especially for someone like us who've spent some time in China, is Southeast Asia is a battleground between East and West when it comes to the big tech companies as well, right? So we're seeing opportunities fueled by local VCs, but also opportunities funded by investment from China, investment from the US. So all this stuff means that Southeast Asia is really in a very good position to start driving the yield of those investments. So that was before COVID, and this is possibly my favorite cartoon right now. On the left side, digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon. And as someone who's worked with digital transformation in various shapes or forms for the last 20 odd years, and talking to corporations about how can you change your model to be more digital, I really have to say that COVID has smashed all the preconceptions and accelerated things to an extraordinary degree. It has changed behavior for consumers. Clearly, we all know this. We all felt this. But consider the first time you actually trust to do a online medical consulting instead of going to a doctor, right? That's a huge barrier to be changed. All our kids who have been educated online, and we see it works. I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old who's actually learned stuff through online education. I thought that was never going to be possible, even for me who's so super digital. Didn't think I was going to get my 3.5-year-old to sit in front of that screen, but it worked, right? Digital entertainment, digital fitness, online groceries, all the stuff that we didn't do before, we are now doing, and businesses are responding. And I think, you know, there's a sector of the economy also in Southeast Asia where maybe, you know, the impetus, kind of like the urgency of digital transformation has not been that large previously, but it's very large now. So digital transformation is definitely happening at an accelerated pace, and we're seeing that in our day-to-day work when we're working, you know, with the companies that we are representing. So this is a huge opportunity. So if we are to say, you know, our kind of thoughts about how to enter the region and how to grow, if you're coming, for example, from Europe and you want to expand into Asia, a couple of points, right? Make sure you validate your product market fit early, but also make sure that you're adapting to a new normal. And because we have started our company relatively late, we've also been very lucky that we've been able to kind of find and steer ourselves into working with companies that are COVID ready, that actually are delivering value in this new normal. When you are entering, prioritize your efforts. You know, it's easy to think that, I mean, Asia is vast, Southeast Asia is vast, but there are 7 metropolitan areas that are accounting for most of the economy, although not all the population. So that's a great place to start. You can start piggy, you know, like jumping from one to the next to build your scale on an ongoing basis. Realize that there are different cultures at play. One thing which is quite apparent if you're coming from a Norwegian or a Nordic perspective into Asia is that the risk avoidance is larger. You need more documentation, more case studies, more de-risking strategies, more things that you kind of have to work alongside your potential partners to make sure that everyone is feeling comfortable. But the flip side of that is once you are in, relationships tend to also be strong and long-lasting. It is important to have relationships. It takes time to build relationships. Make sure you're preparing for longer sales cycles. Make sure you're preparing to sweat the details. In these days, important to find ways to cultivate relationships without necessarily having face-to-face meetings. We've done experiments on doing like online workshops and all kinds of stuff, and you know, we're really testing, learning to find ways to engage. And maybe the last point, which I think is quite important, and we're seeing this a lot, is companies that are coming in from Europe, they should find ways to find local talent to work with, because that's what gets you in. That's how you manage to localize your approach, and that is so important if you want to be successful. So these are kind of like some of our rule of thumbs, if you will, for how we think about things. Obviously, also important to have the right place to launch out of. I mean, there's a reason we are in Singapore. I think Shin has mentioned all of them already. But it's a very practical place to start operating from. So what I wanted to do is just kind of give a couple of stories of two of the companies we're working for and how we've gone about that. So SalesScreen is one of our clients. Their business is to help salespeople get motivated in a sales culture, right? So most salespeople are operating with CRM softwares that kind of calculates everything they do, but it doesn't necessarily help stimulate them. So what SalesScreen is a software that measures, visualizes, and allows salespeople to gamify the KPIs they're meant to achieve. So, you know, 1 week, if Pierre has fewer calls, outbound calls than me, then I will win a prize, simply speaking. So when they first started, one of the things they did was they sent, you know, a very talented young guy from Norway into the region, which is quite similar to what a lot of companies do. Without a network, without kind of knowing exactly where to go, but with a phone book, actually quite similar to what Pierre experienced. But there were no HDBs to knock on doors. I kind of said, yeah, get going. And yeah, worked somewhat well, but not for the big fish, right? So we got brought on board to kind of help to develop an enterprise approach for this. Started targeting within our networks, our extended networks, and built a pipeline focusing on those big institutional companies that will really make a difference, and have landed now a few very big pilots for them, which is very exciting, also during COVID. So that's one example. The other example of a company we're working with is a company called Kawai, another Nordic company that has developed a way of building chatbots into advertising. So what that basically means, you know, instead of advertising to people by shouting at them, start talking with them, make your advertising useful or you know, entertaining, but don't be in the middle. So by making useful advertising with having chatbots that are engaging with consumers, you get better results through the line. So again, what we've done there is basically help them map out all the channels in the region that are relevant to work with, from media agencies to intermediary technology companies to creative agencies, et cetera, build a team around it and start executing very you know, systematically towards that. But starting with relationships in the top and letting them filter through to the different countries and the country levels. So
Lars, we already have a couple of questions coming in. I think these are very, very interesting startups. And I think just also to add on my side, I'm a founder myself, and I think the scaling part is so crucial. It's a part where you either make it or we break it. I think it will be very interesting to find out more, since you have so many experiences working with different companies. But yes, please feel free to also close the end of the session. And then we will definitely ask you more during the questions itself. Yeah.
So our final point is good things happen to those who hustle. So never be afraid to hustle.
That's a very good closing. And we see a very apt picture as well of the back of, sometimes it's a matter of, you know, the endurance and resilience, as you have both shared so nicely also within your own stories. And how you have fought to also, you know, make the various projects happen, work through with the companies that you support, and definitely very curious as we go on the Q&A to find out more about the Skill Factory as well and what you work with companies. Thank you so much for sharing. All right. Feel free to ask your question there in the box as well. We have already received some of them prior and also during the session. If you have not asked the questions yet, do continue in the chat. Lars and Pierre has a lot of experience helping startups scale, fundraise, and also even exited a couple of them. So please feel free to ask and they will come in and share more. And the next speaker, we also have Els. Els is based in Belgium, and she was in a couple of years in Singapore as well, as discussed previously. She's an attorney at law with Luther, and she's also the Secretary General for the European Chamber of Commerce for Singapore. And Els has a hidden skill as we introduce ourselves. Els, you play tennis very well, don't you? Because from a very good backhand serve, as you mentioned, you got also your interesting first job opportunity in Singapore through sports, which is such a fantastic story to share. Would you like to tell us a bit more?
Hello, everyone. Singapore, Europe, wherever you are. Well, we moved with the family in 2014 to Singapore. I had been a lawyer all my life since my education. And of course, I needed to find another job in Singapore, in a new place, on the other side of the world. And yeah, I immediately started networking. I immediately became member of chambers of commerce, of other organizations. And indeed, I also decided to do sports, which I didn't find any time in Europe for. So I thought, okay, I just start to play tennis. And also because I was then a member of a club, also became a member of a club. There I met a lot of people, started playing the tennis. And actually after meeting a lot of people, there was one who said, oh, but else, you know, I will introduce you to my lawyer. And I thought, okay, a lot of people tell you always that they will introduce you, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And finally, he sent an email to this guy and indeed said, I don't know her so well. I just played tennis with her and she has a good backhand, but maybe you should meet her. And then a few weeks later, we met. And then indeed, I got my job in Singapore. That was in 2014. I stayed for like about 6 years, only returned, unfortunately, 1 year ago now, exactly. And basically, for all those who are not familiar with Singapore, who have not been there or not really lived there, I would like to share some facts with you or some experiences I had. Of course, Singapore is small. It's a city-state and is only like 716 square kilometers. I remember that I could drive from one place of the island to the other in about half an hour. So you don't have a lot of commute, which is quite different if you live in Europe or Australia or in the other countries in Asia. Everything is really, really close. And Singapore has, of course, it is small, but 5.7 million people living there. So people live closer together than they mostly do in Europe. And yeah, of course, in Australia, it's a different story. Singapore has 4 official languages, the English, Mandarin, Malay, and Tamil. And the fact that English is a language which is spoken by everyone makes it easy for foreigners to get to live there and, of course, to get to work there. Singapore is a very open economy. The Singapore people are very helpful. And as a foreigner, I found it quite easy to integrate in Singapore. Of course, they also have a big expat community. It is an international environment, a multicultural environment, which I do miss today because it's, yeah, you meet people from all over the world. You can feel at ease also because you can almost buy everything in Singapore, which you buy in your own country. The only thing is it might be a little bit more expensive, but it's quite easy. Of course, Singapore has top education. I think they're even ranked #1 in the world. So making it easy, if you move there with family and everything, you don't have to bother about the education. There's so many international schools, and even some countries like Germany, for instance, France, they have their own international schools. So if it comes to language, that's also even possible. How is it to work in Singapore? A lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people go to Singapore because they want it to be the hub for their business in Asia. Because Singapore has a reliable legal system. It also has a reliable court system. For those who are from continental Europe, it is a common law system and which is very similar to UK, meaning that there's less codification, not so many acts as we do have in continental Europe, and your contracts are really, really, really important. Singapore also has very good intellectual property protection, which is, of course, also for a lot of companies very important. A company can also easily be incorporated in Singapore. I do not know any other country where it's so easy. It can be done in 1 or 2 days. You don't need like a notary public, which is in especially continental Europe the case. It can take quite a long time and you need a lot of documents. That's not necessary in Singapore. You don't need to necessarily incorporate a company if you decide to work there or start your business. A lot of people go there and they decide just maybe for 1 year or even less. They go there, explore, see if it will work, and just you can have like a kind of representative office and then decide later on if you really want to go on, yes or no. So that makes it also quite convenient. Of course, you need, and that's also the case in Europe and all other countries of the world, as a foreigner, you need a work permit, can be an employment pass or an entrepreneur's pass. We are not going into details here. You can always ask more questions if needed. And you can also easily bring your family to Singapore. Of course, you need to meet the conditions, but it's still quite more easy than in a lot of other countries. Also, the fact that for your company 100% can be foreign shareholding is something which is very attractive for people to start their business in Singapore. Of course, networking is very important. I felt that networking in Singapore and in Asia is more important than in Europe. So you meet a lot of people, you have a lot of lunches, a lot of dinners. Of course, after COVID now, things will probably change. Now we have meetings online, and of course, lunches and dinners online are still quite difficult. But I saw that now some people start with online kind of receptions, because of course, we all kind of miss this a little bit. And for Asia, this has always been, for me when I worked there, quite important to connect with people. But of course, there are also the chambers of commerce, all the trade organizations, the embassies of the different countries. I found them always also very helpful to connect people. Or if you have questions, they're always there. They also give you platforms. Now it will be webinars instead of seminars, but they give you platform. And a lot of, also when I was president of the chamber, we gave a lot of startups a platform just to explain what they do. And a lot of them got in contact with, well, actually people they afterwards started working with. I think that communication in Singapore and the rest of Asia, as we also saw in the figures of Poucke, yes, it's amazing. The smartphone, when I first came to Singapore and I was in the MRT, which also works perfectly, the metro for those who are not from Singapore, no strikes and they are on time. It was like, oh, but people do not talk. People are busy with their phones and they're already working. So I started doing the same basically. When you are already in your public transport, you already start working, you already start communicating. And in Asia, you use the WhatsApp also professionally. There's not really a difference if it's professional or private. When I came back to Europe, I just noticed that, yeah, if professionally I want to send a WhatsApp, people send me, can you send an email else? Because yeah, WhatsApp is for private. This will change, and it is changing. But like before COVID, I just felt that things were slower because there was still this intention. We sent emails to each other, and of course, people do not reply so fast when you do it with your mobile phone and your WhatsApp. And of course, Singapore is open to everything which is innovative, which makes it very, very attractive for foreign companies and foreigners to establish their business. What are potential growth sectors in Europe? Well, in Europe, and certainly now after COVID-19, well, it's not after, we are still in the middle of it, but healthcare and life science will be booming. They are already busy during the lockdown everywhere in the world, and I had it also myself. We have consultations online with doctors, so people will not go physically to doctors anymore. So also telemonitoring will become important. So they will develop products to like monitor, for instance, glucose for diabetes patients, the heart rhythm for people who have problems with their heart, telediagnostics, also tools which make it easier to prevent diseases. So this is all already ongoing. Developing tests, like tests now even for COVID, is quite, especially for kids, when it's the nose, the throat, is quite difficult. So they're now already working on tests which are much easier to execute. For Europe, biotech is also very important. FinTech will become more important. Of course, Luxembourg is there, it is already very important, but during COVID and also after COVID, we have seen that people also in Europe use the smartphones much more. I also started buying online, which I didn't do before. So yeah, you pay everything online. So this is also going to be very important. Renewable energy is of course very important. like smart grids in Europe. And of course, for the retail, they see that the online market will really, really, really increase. When it comes to Singapore and Asia, fintech has always been, and you guys are much further already than in Europe, and that's what I also read, that these financial services will grow. When it comes to Singapore, and Poucke probably knows more about it, Singapore is really focusing now on green and sustainable finance. And I think education is also going to be very important, as also stated by Lars and Pierre, the online learning, because it will probably not be the last time that our kids won't be able to go to school physically. I think in Asia, you guys are, because I talked a lot with all my friends who are still in Asia and have their kids at school there. I think you guys are a little bit further than here in Europe, where the education systems are still very traditional, and where there are not budgets for computers and everything. So there's still a lot of work to do here. So I think Europe can learn, and also the healthcare will be also something which will be very important in Asia.
That was really insightful. Also, it's a pleasure always to hear your personal story. We also have one comment from the participants about her interest for tennis as well. And this is such an inspiring story. I think what you mentioned there with regards to how tech is changing the world of doing things, whether is it in healthcare, whether be it in the education sector, even as of today, of how we communicate and got individuals together who are curious to build bridges across the two different regions. That's such an amazing point in history as well, that we can also challenge some of the status quo, as you also rightfully mentioned. For anyone we have who have questions for us with regards to, you know, what are some of the sharing that Els, Lars, Pierre, and Poucke, and even from Alberini, who has done a great job in organizing this session, who represents also Singapore Global Networks. We are now slowly going into the Q&A, and I think some of the first questions is actually related to your sharing with Els as well, because you mentioned about telehealth as one of the areas, or health tech as one of the areas. So if I may go into already some of the first questions, Alberini, should we go into the panel view so that everyone can be seen as well? And thank you very much for sharing, Els. But you have already the first question coming your way. Just hang on. Yeah. So as Alberini and her team, Nadira as well, thanks for supporting us at the backstage of this. I will slowly ask the first question. So we have the first question from Zoe, or Zoe, sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. So this question perhaps would be for Els, and also if the rest of the participants would like to tackle as well, please do feel free. Looking into all these different innovations, how do you find the IP protection for tech startups in Singapore in terms of strictness or encouraging more competition? I think this is something very curious as we challenge new innovations or new ideas. How are we, if we are founders with new ideas, how are we being protected? Els, would you like to take this question as a first start?
Yes, I think in Singapore, the protection for IP is really good and is strict. So actually, it's you need to register. It depends on, of course, what you want to protect and to register. If it's really a patent, is it a trademark? So that will depend, and that's done with the Intellectual Property Office of Singapore. And honestly, I just also looked at the website again, like yesterday. It's really, really, really helpful. So if it's really amazing how it's done. The website, you can really, really check what you want to do, how it will be protected, what you need to do, which form, how much it will cost. So yes, I can say that when it comes to IP protection in Singapore, it is strict and it is followed up. The government is also very strict. which is also the case, of course, in Europe. We do know that this is not always the case, like for instance in China and other Asian countries. But yes, if you, and that's one of the reasons, that's always what I hear from, if I assist companies, they ask, yes, but will our IP be protected in Singapore? Yes, it will be protected in Singapore. Of course, you need to know that it's not a worldwide protection. But of course, also there are availabilities, depends on how much you want to spend, because of course, the protection, depending on what protection you want, will cost money. So that's what I could share about this.
Thank you very much. And, I think the second question is related, and you have also answered them partially. This came from Karen. You asked if there is sufficient legal expertise to support tech innovations, and one of her specific questions was for fintech, which you also mentioned, which has legal and regulatory implications that don't always fit existing framework. Would you like to add something to that for the specific sector for fintech? Thanks for the question, Karen.
What exactly would you like to know about the fintech, or because of what? Could she elaborate a little bit the question?
If I interpret that correctly,
yeah.
Karen, feel free to add. I think because of the cross-boundary specific financial regulations, do you feel that there's sufficient legal support when it comes to protecting companies who are crossing over the different regions for fintech?
Yeah, that's not an easy question, because all different countries have different regulation, even already in Europe. It's not that if you apply with the rules in one country, that it will be sufficient with the rules in the other country. So that's, for the time being, not something you can simply transform. Therefore, we should need bilateral or multilateral agreements, between countries, between like Europe and Asia, which is at the time being not the case. So yes, there's protection and there's legislation everywhere. There's in Singapore, there's in other countries in Asia, there's in Europe. Of course, you have European directives. So in Europe, it's a little bit more streamlined, but it's not that you can simply transform it. There will be other regulatory rules in different countries. But is fintech protected? Yes, it is. There are regulations, but they are all different.
Yeah. So Karen,
okay, yeah.
Expertise.
Yeah, okay, I saw. Okay.
I think you have also answered that.
Well, thank you, Caroline.
No problem. Does come from a legal company that does a lot of cross-regional work between Germany, Belgium, Singapore. So Karen, I believe else you could also reach out separately, and then you can go in depth, because I believe, Karen, the question would probably need also more details on your side later on. So thanks for sharing, and thanks, Karen, for the question. For this question, perhaps could be for Lars and Pierre. This is about also someone who has the interest in establishing businesses in Singapore, and also could be from Shin as well. So the question came, what according to you was a challenge when you established your business in Singapore? I think Lars and Pierre have a wealth of experiences to share here. And how has that been addressed in the current scenario for making it a business-friendly place? So the second part, Shin, can also perhaps share your opinion here.
Of course. Good question. First, I would like to mention how easy it is to set up a company in Singapore. You can literally set up your private limited company in less than 48 hours. You can either do it yourself, because it's all electronically. If you need a corporate secretary to help you to do it, that will cost you, including all the government fees, 1,000 Singapore dollar. In addition, you get a set of subsidies depending on what kind of industry you're going to start up a company in. tax subsidies, etc. So it's easy to get going. But the question was about the challenges, and a little bit to what Carolina was referring to in the beginning. It's about getting started. It's about getting out there and getting the first customers. So it's networking, it's hard work. But we always say, me and Lars together, that the toughest part of starting a company is actually to start, to make the decision. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. That is only tough. The rest is just hard work. What we like about Singapore is that everything is built out around you to support you making that decision to start. So I would say that Singapore is a very startup friendly society. So challenge is to get started. The rest is just fun.
Great.
Thanks very much, Carol, Lars. Maybe I'll just add on to how we try to make Singapore business friendly. I think Lars, Els are very kind of Singapore as well. They've shared quite a bit about their experiences. From my vantage point, in terms of helping businesses set up in Singapore, typically I find that for companies or individuals that are going into Singapore for the first time, where they don't have the sort of existing relationships or networks, they tend to take longer. Firstly, to find the right people to staff the team, how they build the team. And then, as what Lars mentioned, how do you then gradually build relationships, whether with suppliers, with customers, with partners. That, I would say, take relatively longer versus those that are already in Singapore. Usually after the first 1 and 2 years, where they start getting the hang of Singapore, usually we see that they're off on their own, and they actually come back and tell us more things that we don't already know of. But I think particularly for those who have not been to Singapore or who is going to Singapore for the first time, I think that is the part where whether as EDB, SGN, or Enterprise Singapore, we are trying to have more events, opportunities, basically for networking, for connections to take place. We also try to make introductions where we can, just to help people get started. Exactly like Lars said, it is, I think, the first 1 to 2 years. And I think apart from all those formal policies, putting in place the schemes that we do, those are the hard things, hard substance we can do. But I think the soft part, increasingly, we are trying to put in more effort and energy there as well, because we see tremendous value coming out of it. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Poucke. I think maybe this is a good time also for Alberini. Would you like to share? Because networks and networking has been mentioned by everyone on the panel, right? So the importance of networking in various different forms, through sports, through a bit of alcohol sometimes, through social gatherings, and now remotely changes a bit also of how we do networks. And I think Alberini, you being in Singapore, but also experience working in New York and also in London, and also you shared also, your own return back to work journey in our conversations, back to home journey previously, about also the need to come back after your experience in Hurricane Sandy, which is a small story that we shared. What do you think, and how would the Singapore Global Networks be able to support in a structured approach the networking process, remote or in person? It would be great to hear from you.
Mm-hmm. So just share again, I mean, the role of what Singapore Global Network does is really to expand our global network of family that includes our overseas Singaporeans, friends of Singapore that would include people like Els, Lars, Pierre, who are currently working in Singapore, lived in Singapore before, or even people who, for those who have heard about Singapore from their own networks. So what we're trying to do here as the Singapore Global Network is being able to bring together this global network of the family, friends, and fans to help provide that playing that facilitation role in bridging connections for various purposes, for that shared passion in just Singapore. Some people who have have lived and worked in Singapore before, you have a certain affiliation and connection to Singapore. We want to be able to foster networks with that shared passion in Singapore's culture, for example, or bringing people together with like-minded individuals or professionals like yourself, or those who have joined us today, just wanting to hear about Singapore in terms of its business opportunities, whether Singapore could be that next career destination, for example, or just being in the heart of Asia, for example. We hope that through our programs and initiatives and events, well, virtual for now because of COVID, we want to be able to bring these people together. And part of the Singapore Global Network's offerings and benefits for those who joined us is that you will be regularly kept updated with the latest news and developments about Singapore, related to Singapore, and also news and developments about our networks of Singaporeans overseas, as well as the Friends of Singapore living abroad. So do stay tuned towards the end of the event, where I will share more ways on how you can connect not just with SGN, with Singapore, but also for those of you who are tech professionals, there's also an additional avenue where we will be able to connect you to other tech professionals.
Yeah, well, I must say, Awarini, you've done a great job, because you brought us all together as one network without having even meet each other in person. So thanks to you for that as well. And I also get the benefit of being in such a session.
No, and thank you for being a part of this as well.
Yeah. And now, I think to add on from the last question, Lars and Pierre, you mentioned the thing that we need to do when we start a business is to start. So this person is asking with regards to his or her AI startup in Singapore, and is there any particular advice you would give if he or her or him or she wants to start an AI startup in Singapore?
Yeah, and I think as Poucke mentioned, there's a lot of networks, there's a lot of accelerator, and there's a lot of corporates that are rallying around anything related to deep tech, and AI fits very well into that. So Singapore is the right market to get going with AI. We would be happy to see how we can connect you to our network to make sure that you can have a good land and expand strategy into the region.
Sounds good. Thanks for sharing. Poucke, is there any thing you want to add, or even else with regards to startups or companies that you know in the AI field?
Yeah.
That you want to add?
My very quick response, I think, just to add on to Lars, is really, I think we'd be happy to learn more directly from this individual, what is the interest area, because I think we can go a lot more specific in terms of where are the opportunities, where are the spaces. So maybe we could follow up after the call to go into greater depth. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for extending also your support beyond this session, as Lars and Pierre kindly have also offered, and also Poucke as well. And Elsa, I know you also mentioned that you're very supportive of this ecosystem. Please feel free to reach out, and that's what live networking is meant to be, even beyond this hour and a half together. So for the next question, this is from Manoj Dawani. So you understand and you've heard from the panelists that there are benefits that the Singapore government provides when we register or incorporate our company in Singapore. And there needs to be a few administrative changes on the company structure, as well as I assume that this person already has existing investors. So his question is, do you have any advisory team that can help with framing these changes in the incorporation structure, and also then quantifying some of the benefits that can be accrued to his current existing investors?
Perhaps I will respond. Yeah, I'll respond to that. I think from the question, I cannot get whether it is an accounting or legal sort of changes required. But what we could do, I mean, there are available material from EDB and also from our partner agencies on the list of advisory teams that could go in to help. But I think happy to address. I think we just need to better understand what these administrative changes they are referring to. Because if it is basic changes that is required by ACRA, you might not even need to incur any expenses to make those changes. So we just need to understand this a bit more. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for answering. I think you have answered this question, so there is support available. So feel free to reach out, and then they can take you through the different steps, and maybe the solution can be very simple and direct.
Carol, there's another question, so maybe I'll take it together with this question in terms of support, also for digitalization of traditional industries. So maybe to share broadly, we have broad-based schemes available. So they are available to all industries, whether through IRA. Some of them are even automated. Like for example, during this COVID situation, we have extended as a government the job support scheme. They are open directly, and some of these schemes are automated. There are also specific schemes for different industries. For example, traditional industry, you look at the build construction industry, for example, they have their own set of, whether it comes to energy efficiency, digitalization, they all have their own specific schemes too. So there's a broad array, depending on which industry you are in, to promote digitization and basically put in place more technology or capital investment to improve productivity. So I think there's quite an array, but broadly, happy to share more as some of the participants share with us which industries they are coming from and what they're looking at. Yeah. There was also one last question before this session, in terms of where people can find collaborations on building infrastructure, right? Because I think we saw a student asking they was interested in doing research work in building and construction. And I think that is where, apart from HDB, one of the lead champion promoting it, because they're building HDB, there's a very direct problem statement across the whole of Singapore for public housing. JTC themselves is also taking the lead for their industrial estates. So they're another agency that are actively looking at it. Beyond that, in the private sector, you see players like CapitaLand setting up their own smart cities lab to partner both MNCs and startups to find problem statements and to work on projects. So there are just some of these opportunities out there available.
Yeah, thanks for Shin. Thank you very much. I think the traditional sectors, industries from the current situation all need to reinvent and pivot, and this is really important to see how it's done. You also mentioned this new interesting initiatives that's from the different sectors or government initiatives. So there were also previously questions about, how can you find opportunities as individuals. So these are some of the ways that if we would like to explore career opportunities in the region, in Singapore, could look into to take on some of these projects as well. And so feel free to approach the panel for that. As we head towards the end of the session, we have many questions coming in, and these are some of the ones that we would cover. The ones that we couldn't cover, please feel free to also reach us out directly, and then we can also try to tackle them beyond this session. But this question, I think, is also one of the crux of the discussion today. So one person has asked, what are examples of some of the tech partnerships that you have seen with your interactions with your clients, you yourself as you work with the businesses that you support, in the case of Lars and Pierre, or Poucke when you work with different organizations representing the Economic Development Board of Singapore. Have you seen any interesting tech partnerships between the two regions, in particular to Europe and Singapore?
Yeah, we can help answering that question. So a very fruitful platform is called Antler, which is a organization that or a VC that is investing into talents to build companies. It's a Singapore-based fund. It's built and invested in more than 200 companies globally. And that is a very good network, as they're based in 14 different cities globally and expanding by the month. That is a very good sort of starting point to network around, because they are very tied up into the startup ecosystem in the region. So I think that is a good one-stop shop would you like to add some other partnership, Shin?
Yes, maybe at the country-to-country level, there is what we call the Eureka Global Stars program. There are quite a number of participating European countries, Switzerland, Netherlands, UK, together with Singapore. So they are running a global call. It is ongoing from June to October, the middle of October. So they are running a call to invite startups, partnerships, proposals on that. That is one. Another one, the major one upcoming one would be Switch, of course, by Enterprise Singapore, this event, tech event in Singapore, where you have all the players, where they gather all the players for whether it's for competition, sharing, exchanges, there will be webinars. So I think those are the two big ones you can look out for. One more specific one, because I'm now based in Germany. There's a Singapore-German Business Federation event, GSPF event coming up as well from Enterprise Singapore. There's another opportunity for Singapore and German companies to collaborate and connect together. So these are just some of this out there. Happy to share more details if there's interest.
Thanks for sharing. Thank you. And I think this is probably the last question that we take, as discussed previously. If you have any questions, feel free to write in still, and we'll try to filter the questions to the appropriate different organizations that can support. The last one is also looking at how we can collaborate and looking into our own unique strengths, which is really important. So the question is, what do you see the Southeast Asia startup market that is unique compared to the other markets? And what can the region learn from other more developed markets like Silicon Valley or Triangle, London, etc. So this is, I think, also looking into, with each region having our unique strength and perspective, and then where this bridge and collaboration makes sense. So the question is, how do you see Southeast Asia as unique? Is it venture capital, the way we look into funding, for example, or the different ideas or sectors compared to other markets?
Yeah, we can first step with that. I think the uniqueness in Singapore and this part of the world, say the accessibility to a big market from Singapore, being the center and the hub of Southeast Asia. The backing you get from both the government and also the venture capitals in the region is very strong. They are quick. And then I think it's also the adoption of entering into a new market. How quickly the adoption is of new technologies in the region versus what we see in most of parts of the West. So I'd like to say those are the three uniqueness we see in Southeast Asia with Singapore.
Maybe I'll add on to what has been shared. I think when you look at Southeast Asia market, it is unique in that it is not homogeneous like the American developed, not as homogeneous as America, Europe, or China. So what you find startups doing, and the successful ones as well, unicorns, they are very, very fast at applying to the local context. So they manage to build sort of a good platform cost-wise, but also then adjusting rapidly in terms of the innovation they need to get the product market fit in each city. So you see that the likes of Gojek, Grab, the rate and speed at which they change and update their technology, their UI in different markets is quite impressive. So I think that is what is unique. And also I think the fact that the needs are just slightly different. In Europe, in US, I think you are looking sometimes at more sophisticated needs. In Southeast Asia, I think it is still rising middle class. That is a very different proposition. So how companies and startups are positioning and pivoting themselves to address some of these needs are very different. And I would say very, very fast. Yeah.
Sounds good. Else, would you like to also share something here with regards to what you find unique? Because you also have the personal interaction and experience in Asia and working with clients in Asia in different time zones. We don't hear, you have to unmute. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
For me, it's also a little bit like for Lars and Pierre, I think, and that's what I hear also from clients, the accessibility of Singapore, the easiness to integrate, to start your business, the openness. Also, the things go really fast, much faster than somewhere else. Also, expertise. I mean, these are, I think, the things which make it indeed a great advantage compared to the other side of the world. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much for sharing. And thank you everyone for being such a good sport. We have many questions coming in, some of them very specific to different industries, including smart nation, energy. If we don't answer them now because of the time, we'll definitely find a way to redirect those questions later on. So feel free to reach out to us also on an individual separate basis. And thank you to the great panelists as well here, Els, Lars, Pierre, Poucke, for sharing not only on the business side, but also all your triumphs and trials that comes along your way in your experiences, both in the different regions. And look forward to also continuing the discussion, which is more important. And as rightfully said, it's time to start and hustle and look for opportunities and bridge that gap. Barini, I leave now, move it to you.
Great. Well, thank you, Carolina, and our awesome panel of speakers, Lars, Pierre, Els, and Poucke. I've learned and gained knowledge hearing your insights and sharing, and I'm sure many of us or many of the attendees amongst us will agree with me. So before you go, may I seek your help in helping us with your feedback about today's session by filling up this online form with this QR code. I'm just going to leave this on for a couple of minutes before I share some ways that you can stay in touch with Singapore Global Network and also for the tech professionals as well. So I'm just going to leave this on for a couple of seconds before I go on to the next slide. Okay, this is better. Oops, sorry. Technology. Okay. Okay, so if you've gotten this, I wanted to share that we hope that you are able to join our Singapore Global Network community and stay in touch with us by filling up this QR code on my left-hand side, or what you see on the QR code that's on your left. And another thing to mention as well is that if you are a mid to senior level tech professional with at least 5 years of experience, please do join us in the Tech Plus 65 community, where you can connect with tech professionals overseas as well as in Singapore. So to do that, the QR code is on my right-hand side of the screen. If you could join us by just adding that as well. Okay, so I'll put this back on later on towards the end of the event. So next up, I wanted to share on a couple of upcoming events that the Singapore Global Network is organizing in the next few weeks. First up, we have a fireside chat on emerging stronger in Asia Pacific between Dr. Janil Puthucheary, Singapore Senior Minister of State, and Alan Blue, who is the co-founder of LinkedIn, on 11th of September. While I know that the timing may not be suitable for those who are residing in Europe, but do sign up anyway so that we will be able to make a copy of the recording to you thereafter. So that's the QR code to do that. And I'll send the QR code in the post thank you email later on. And then next up, on the 17th of September, we have an interesting webinar about eco-entrepreneurs that will be organized, or rather that will be held on the 17th of September, which will be a friendlier time for those who are residing in Europe. So it's going to be at 4 p.m. Singapore time, which is about 10 a.m. Europe time. So I hope you will be able to join us as well, featuring the guest speaker of Jeff Yeo. Okay, with that, we've come to the end of today's webinar, and we thank every one of you who are able to join us today. Please stay in touch with us, and also please take care, stay well and healthy. So hope to see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks. There is a request to add some of the links. If you want to stay on the chat a bit longer, we can also add some of the links here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Just gotta keep the PowerPoint on for a little while. Great, thank you for joining us. For those who are still around, okay, great everyone. I'm going to be kind of closing this webinar in about a minute's time at about 5:08. Thank you for joining us, Els, Carolina, Shin.
Yeah, thank you. Please remember to save the chat as well. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining.